Well, first off, it's great to see such a large gathering here for your meetings every month, and also thanks for the invite, because I always enjoy getting out to shows like this. I don't get out enough. Now, I had all these intentions. Tonight was going to be my first ever use of a PowerPoint presentation. But anyway, it didn't happen. I've been beekeeping for quite a few years, over 40 years, and as a beekeeper, I quite often get I get questions about pollination of different things, and I'm also part of conversations where I think people they don't have a full understanding of it, because I've also had about a 30-year involvement with growing fruit trees, grafting fruit trees, advising people on fruit trees, and also had extensive experience with seed production of veggies. And tonight I just thought I'd come along and give a talk to beekeepers about how pollination basically works. Now, one of the things that motivated me, I get quite a few beekeepers basically tell me some things that are inconsistent with my training, would be the best way to describe it. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on a heap of beekeeper sites, and I've always got these things rocking up. If we lose the bees, we'll starve, and pictures of all the different veggies that are going to disappear if bees disappear. Yes, bees are very important, absolutely important in mankind's future. But I'll just give you something to think about. If you take the 5 main crops worldwide, potatoes, maize, rice, wheat and soybeans, somewhere probably from 40 to 50% of the calories in the diet worldwide, bees have no part in the pollination of any of those crops. Bees disappear, 40 to 50% of the calories in our diet are different. I get all these things on Facebook, pictures and stuff coming through that are going to disappear if bees disappear. Well, like tomatoes. This picture of tomatoes with the things that are going to disappear. Capsicums, chilies. Now, I work for Digger Seeds that specialised in tomatoes. So you get a seed production order for the year. You might have to produce seed from maybe 30 different types of tomatoes, 40 different types of tomatoes. Like you get an order come through that you've got to have 1.5 kilograms of Tommy Toe tomato seed and 750 kilograms of another one, 750 grams of another one, and so forth. And okay, you've got maybe an acre of ground. You've got to plant out these 30 different types of tomatoes in your acre of ground. And you've also got maybe another 80 different ones to trial on your acre of ground. So you're growing all these tomatoes side by side, aren't you? Of course, like I was up there, I had about 50 hives at the time, so I think I had about 50 hives at the time. I've got 50 hives of bees maybe about 500 metres away from this acre of seed production land. What happens if the Tommy Toe crosses with the Russian black tomato? Well, I send off dodgy seed, don't I? No job next year. Now, I could grow 30 different types of tomato side by side, and 80 different types of tomato for trials. We'd pick them each week and weigh them and see which ones were the most productive. And they did not cross-pollinate, even though I had 50 hives of bees beside them. Simple reason is because bees play no part in the pollination of tomatoes. Bees, I imagine, evolved in one part of the world and tomatoes in another part of the world, and all the bits in their flowers don't match up with the length of the bee's proboscis or whatever. So, don't stress too much. We don't want to lose our bees, but tomatoes won't disappear. Now, also on these things that were flashing up on Facebook were like chilies, capsicums. Well, like I had a dozen different types of chilies that I had to produce, and capsicums that I had to produce seed for. I mean, probably 2 acres of land. And the bees going to cross-pollinate from one to the other? Well, actually, I don't think they do, but there are other insects that will cross-pollinate the capsicums and chilies. One of the main problems I had was the only literature that I had to go on to work, like to plan my seed production on, was American, and they have a totally different set of insects. Now, the American literature on seed production says that where you grow a number of capsicums and chilies on the one location, you simply net them to exclude insects. So like I've got this row of one type of capsicum, this row of another type of capsicum, and like I've got 10 different rows of the 10 different types of capsicums that I've got to produce seed from, and they are all netted with a net to exclude all insects so that one doesn't cross-pollinate with another. And why did I do that? Because the American literature said it did, so I can assume that there's insects in America that will cross-pollinate one another. There's very likely no such insects in Australia, but I couldn't take the risk. So I've got all these rows of capsicums excluded from all insects. End of the season, you've got to come and harvest your capsicums and scrape the seed out by hand into a bucket. And I can assure you, looking at those capsicums and chilies, there is no difference in the seed numbers in the capsicums growing under the, excluded from insects, to what there is in the ones that we were trialling outside. So clearly insects and bees are not necessary for capsicums. Growing 3 different types of eggplants for seed. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched in the garden, but I've never actually seen bees working tomatoes. I've never seen them working capsicums. I probably don't spend as much time just sitting there looking at them as I should. But I have seen significant numbers of bees working eggplants. I'll deviate a bit too, just a bit on botany. You have families of plants which is broken up into genus, or plural genera, and the genus is broken up into species. Now, capsicums, tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, they're all in the family Solanaceae. Now, not a lot of these members of this family are worked by bees. Tomatoes and capsicums aren't, but eggplants are worked by bees. Like you can see significant numbers of bees collecting pollen and quite likely nectar from eggplants. So anyway, I've got 3 different types of eggplants that I've got to produce seed from. American book says, well, you just cover them from insects. So I exclude put mosquito netting basically over, or something a bit more robust, over all these eggplants, the rows of eggplants, so that insects can't get at them, insects can't go from one to the other and cross-pollinate them. So I've excluded the bees, I've excluded all the insects, and I still get, as best I can assess it, equal seed production from the eggplants that have had all insects excluded from them. So you get these things, you get all these pictures rocking up on Facebook saying pictures of all the things that are going to disappear if we lose our bees. Tomatoes, capsicums and eggplants have been among those things that I've seen pictures of that are going to disappear if we lose our bees. And it's not correct. Clearly they can set seed without bees. Now, I'd process all the seed and I'd send it off down to Dramana. I was up at Seymour. I'd send it off down to Dramana, and they always did germination tests on them, and the germination was expected to be above 90%, or you get a rap over the knuckles, and the germination from the seed, from the plants that had all insects excluded from it, was as good as what you would expect from plants that had access to bees. So Yeah, look, we can't afford, we must value our bees. If we got Varroa tomorrow, there are a number of plants that could double or triple in price in the supermarket. That was the New Zealand experience. So a bit on that now. This is a totally unprepared talk, so you can have questions at the end, or if anybody wants to pull me up in the middle and change my path. Yeah.
About bees like lemon balm, but I haven't seen one bee at my lemon balm plantation going for flowers.
So you've got no bees working your lemon balm?
Yes, and bees supposedly love lemon balm. Is it because the flowers are wrong?
I don't know. I've just planted some as a companion plant under my fruit trees. I'll give him your email address and ask him in a year's time. I tend to be... I don't follow exactly as fact everything I read or appears on Facebook. So I can't tell you.
Neil, you mentioned 3 plants in New Zealand that went up in price, so presumably their overall production went down.
No, I didn't.
Which ones they were?
I didn't say 3 plants. I said a number of plants went up 3 times in price on the figures that I was given, and I didn't check that to verify. So it's a significant rise in the price of some horticultural crops in New Zealand when Varroa went through and basically eliminated all the feral bees. Okay, so I'll just go through a few of our common fruit trees. Now, there's apples. I'll start with apples. They're probably the most commonly planted fruit trees. There are 3 types of apples. There are diploid, triploid and tetraploid. Now, there's not going to be a test at the end, so don't worry. A bit of a simple explanation. Now, tetraploid is self-fertile. Now, let's say you plant a tetraploid apple and there are no other apples within 5 kilometres. As long as they are self-fertile, that is, their own pollen will cause them to set fruit. Now, self-fertile doesn't mean self-pollinating. They're 2 different things. They may be self-fertile, but they still need insects or wind or something to transfer the pollen from the male part of the flower to the female part of the flower, which may only be that much. But most of the fruit trees most of the fruit trees that are self-fertile are not self-pollinating. I have actually come across one self-pollinating apple. I grafted out about 30 types of apples, and I left them in basically a shade cloth house where bees were excluded. And what happens? This one puts on about 6 flowers, doesn't it? Every flower set fruit, even though there were no bees there. It is just exceptional. So you have tetraploid, which is self-fertile. So one tetraploid apple with vectors that cause the transfer of pollen will give you a good fruit set. Now you have diploids. If you have one diploid on its own, its pollen is incompatible with it. So if you have 2 diploids flowering at the same time, 2 different diploids, and you have bees to transfer pollen, you will get a set of fruit. So, diploids need a partner, and the third in the group is triploids. Gravenstein is a good example of a triploid. Renat Buchanan is another good example of a triploid apple. Now, these don't actually produce viable pollen. Now, let's say, for example, you had a Jonathan and a Gravenstein growing side by side. The Jonathan, as far as I know, is a diploid, and it will pollinate your Gravenstein, but your Gravenstein won't pollinate your Jonathan. So they are your 3 groups of apples: diploids, triploids and tetraploids, and it is the same for pears. Pears, you have diploids, triploids and tetraploids, and your tetraploids are self-fertile. And the other thing with these, if you have a multi-graft, and one really grows vigorously and the other doesn't grow very vigorously. Your tetraploids tend to be less vigorous. Your diploids can be anything from minimal vigour to quite vigorous, but your triploids, as far as I know, are invariably vigorous. So you get the multi-graft, whack a Gravenstein on it, and it will grow into a great big branch where the others are smaller. Now, peaches and nectarines, they are almost invariably self-fertile. That is, you can stick one peach in the ground or one nectarine. It doesn't need a mate, but it still needs visits from insect pollinators such as bees. Quinces, I've your ag notes from over there too. I had a quick browse through there. So tonight I've come along prepared to say a lot of what's in that ag note. So I'm going to disagree with some of it and add to some of it. The quinces are almost invariably, or as far as I know, invariably self-fertile. So all you need is one quince, but you still need visits from pollinators. Cherries, they're a little bit more complicated. Once again, our ag note says that your cherries all need a pollinator. That's not correct. Varieties like Stella, Lavins, and a few others, they are self-fertile, and you only need one of those cherries, and the self-fertile cherries will generally pollinate all other cherries that flower at the same time. The cherries are a bit more complicated because there are some incompatibilities. There are some instances where you have two different cherry varieties flowering at the same time and the pollination is incompatible. Plums, they're generally divided into European and Japanese, and most of them need a pollinator, and generally, or possibly invariably, European plums won't cross-pollinate with Japanese plums and vice versa. So if, for example, you've got a King Billy plum, you might need a Grand Duke or something, another European plum to pollinate it, or if you have a Satsuma, you might want a Santa Rosa or something to cross-pollinate it. But Japanese plums appear to set fruit better, more often without a pollinator than the Europeans. Europeans quite often invariably don't set fruit without a pollinator, and Japanese plums quite often set a lot better quality. No electronic collars hit me or anything. Yeah. Peter?
I had some hives in a berry farm this year to pollinate the blackberries in particular, but the owner of the farm was saying that bees don't play a part in the pollination of strawberries. Do you have any ideas on that?
We had, a couple of years ago, I was working at this place that put in basically a shade house, longer than this room and about 2/3 as wide. This enormous great construction made out of shade cloth. The idea of it was to keep the mosquitoes away from the ladies working the garden. It also excluded bees, and we still got a very good crop of strawberries. However, there is indications that you may get bigger strawberries with pollination. There's a berry farm up at Reuven that really sells to the top end of the gourmet range of berries, and they believe quite strongly that bees significantly improve the quality of their fruit, the size and the shape of their fruit, but you still get fruit without pollination.
Okay, that seems to be similar with some blackberries and things, with the bees pollinating them, it gets a better fruit set. Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah.
But there are a number of instances of things that will set fruit without bees, but set a bigger crop or bigger fruit with bees. Now I'm just deviating a bit, but a lot of the challenge with your apples and pears and your plums is actually to get your two varieties flowering at the same time. And I think a lot of people probably don't pay enough attention to that. and that is often a reason why they fail to get a fruit set. Now, just an observation as a beekeeper and as an orchardist, you flower, like most of our common fruit trees, flower in early spring, August, September, when we have unstable, windy, cold weather for a lot of the time. Now, just what I've noted is that bees will fly only very short distances in that weather. Now, like fine weather, bees, I've heard up to 5 miles, which I think is ridiculous, but bees will fly quite often 4 kilometres for a honey flow, like particularly during the autumn and the stable weather, and particularly for a good quality high sugar content eucalypt flow. But during your cold weather in spring, when your fruit trees are flowering, they may not go over 100 metres from their hive. And that is when it is particularly important to have a beehive in your orchard. Just something else that comes up very regularly on a lot of the gardening programs, like sites I'm on Facebook and such, is people say, oh, look, you should plant lavender, you should plant borage under your fruit trees to attract the bees. Now, bees are very largely species specific in their flights. If a bee leaves a hive, it will usually only work one species. It is unusual for them to fly off to someone's orchard to get a feed of the lavender and then go up and pollinate the nectarines. It is a different bee that comes out. Look, I've seen literature that said that bees are exclusively species specific. And some young lass posted a beautiful picture on our Facebook page there about 2 years ago of a bee working a nectarine flower. And what was on the bee's legs? It wasn't nectarine pollen, it was Eggplant pollen from Patterson's curse. So, that's just a lesson too. Did you know bees can't read? You see this stuff in the books. Well, like your bees can't read, can they? So it may be an indication, but don't take it as gospel. But bees are predominantly species specific. Now, before I go from fruit trees, any questions on fruit trees?
Just one. I had a Santa Rosa. I have a Santa Rosa, and it's about 4 or 5 years old, and it had a really good crop. But I don't have another Japanese crop.
Well, as I said, I said that your European plums are almost exclusively, they virtually need pollination. And if you have a look at your egg note that's up there, it says that the Japanese ones do. But I've varied from that tonight, and I've said Japanese ones quite often need a pollinator. And you said it was Santa Rosa? Yes. Your Santa Rosa and your Satsuma, which are your 2 most commonly grown Japanese plums, I think are 2 Japanese plums that may well be self-fertile.
Well, this one seems to be.
Yeah, but I wouldn't extrapolate that to all Japanese plums, but there are certainly Japanese plums out there that are self-fertile, but the literature says that they need pollinators.
Neil, one of the visitors we've had here is a gentleman who runs olive groves a bit further out, and he's a beekeeper. I think his argument is that having bees increases the fruit set that he gets with his olives, and he also provides bees to a number of other olive growers all around this area as well. So that seems to be an example of a variety that will increase the production. At least that's, I think, his argument.
Yeah, look, I come along, you think a speaker's coming along here to talk to you, but it is great. I have no experience with olives, and it is great to get people's observations.
How about pomegranates?
Well, look, I don't know the pollination needs of pomegranates, but all pomegranates I'm aware of are self-fertile. Just about every pomegranate tree I've seen has been growing on its own with no other pomegranate, like within 3 kilometres, and every one I'm aware of has set fruit. But I don't know, I don't know their needs with bees, but they are almost certainly self-fertile.
Yeah, back to your tomatoes with the seeds, to get true to type, did you, just by covering them, gave you true to type, or did you have to pollinate some yourself? Or?
What was that, sorry?
Just get back to the tomatoes, to get the seed true to type.
Yes.
You said you covered them with a net.
No, I didn't cover the tomatoes.
You didn't cover tomatoes. So how did they not cross-pollinate?
Because they are self-pollinating, and we've taken them out of their natural environment. In their natural environment, they probably very likely have insects with a different shaped head or a shorter proboscis, or like hairs in the right place on their forehead or something that transfers the pollen. Now, some tomato varieties, a few tomato varieties around that have a potato-like leaf. Now, the tomato varieties that have a potato-like leaf will cross-pollinate under Australian conditions, but the tomatoes that don't have a potato-like leaf generally don't. Now, occasionally you will see a double tomato, which is a figure-8 shaped tomato. That has been from a double flower, which has a wider opening on it. Now, if we're saving seed, we never save tomatoes that are figure-8 shaped, because the wider flower can let insects in and allow them to be cross-pollinated. But otherwise, we simply don't have the insects in Australia to transfer the pollen with tomatoes other than the potato leaf. We've taken them out of their natural environment, and we've taken them away from their natural pollinators.
So if you, say in the home garden situation, if you've got 3 varieties in your home garden and you save a tomato, you're pretty sure that that will be true to type for seed?
Look, I am not aware of instances where they have been cross-pollinated, and we grew them very close together, the figures, and that was accepted practice. So, just save your seeds from your tomatoes.
Sorry, Neil, blue-banded bees will pollinate tomatoes.
Okay, thanks, Dan. In that case, look, I presume they haven't been where I've grown tomatoes. And if they will pollinate tomatoes, they may cross-pollinate them.
Normally you'll hear them on the tomato plants before you see them. You'll hear the bee buzzing, and then when they get near on the flower, the pitch goes up quite remarkably because they're shaking the flower and shaking the pollen off.
Okay. So they're actually shaking the pollen off the flower.
Self-pollination.
So they quite likely aren't a vector of cross-pollination as well, because they're not actually picking their bib into the next flower.
Oh, they'll go on to the next flower.
Yes, and they're shaking it rather than sticking their proboscis in and transferring pollen. Look, anyway, if I see blue bees, I will... Blue banded bees? Or banded? Banded. So I'm going to go back to a few of the veggies. That's another family, Leguminosae, which is your peas and beans. In most instances, bees don't work there. Like if you're growing your standard climbing beans or your French beans, your annual ones, you can grow, like once again, seed production. We grew these rows of these side by side to produce the seed for Digger's catalogue. Now, we couldn't afford to have them cross-pollinated. I had me 50 hives of bees 500 metres away. Never saw a bee working the beans, and just assumed that there would not be any cross-pollination. Never saw bees working them, and as there was no cross-pollination, assumed that bees are totally unnecessary for seed production for them. Now, if you grow broad beans, you'll quite often see bees working them for pollen. Bees work them quite extensively for pollen. Broad beans will definitely produce viable seed without bees. However, if you do have bees working them, it's assumed that they have the ability to cross-pollinate two different varieties, and once again you don't get seed true to type. You've got your perennial beans, like your 7-year beans, and you will see bees working them, and it is known that bees cross-pollinate them. However, once again, bees are not necessary for the seed production. Now, lettuces, once again, bees play no part in the pollination of lettuce. There's mixed stuff on stuff like carrots. The available literature I've got on carrots says that they are pollinated by a number of different insects, including bees. So if your bees got wiped out tomorrow, your carrots, celery, parsnips would probably very likely still get pollinated, and you would still get seed from them. We think of all the seed that, all the things that are going to disappear that are on our plate. Like, get all these things rocking up on your beekeeper's Facebook page about all the things that are going to disappear. One thing I've never seen pop up on their pictures is a clover flower. Now, clover is a very beneficial nitrogen fixer in a lot of pasture crops. It has been replaced in a lot of instances with synthetic nitrogen, and synthetic nitrogen it really inhibits or destroys your soil bacteria. Now, how many of you are aware that soil bacteria have evolved spores to be a particular size that initiates the formation of moisture droplets in the clouds? Now, you know how when they see clouds, they fly over the plane and they burn silver iodide to produce a crystal of exactly the right shape to initiate rainfall. Over millions of years, soil bacteria has evolved, which is quite logical if you think about it, to have airborne spores that will increase the rainfall. Same as what cloud seeding does with silver iodide, but it's probably a lot more efficient.